The New Mexico desert stretched endlessly under the star-filled sky, as cowboy Daniel Martinez rode toward his small ranch. After 3 days of searching for strayed cattle, at 38, Daniel had learned to read the signs of the high desert, the way the wind carried sounds farther at night, how shadows could hide dangers or simply lonely travelers, and most importantly, when something didn't belong in the natural rhythm of the wilderness. The small figure huddled near his water trough didn't belong there, but it wasn't threatening. Daniel reined in his horse about 20 yards away and watched carefully, trying to determine what he was seeing in the moonlight dot. As his eyes adjusted, Daniel realized he was looking at a child, probably no more than 8 or 9 years old, kneeling beside his water trough and drinking desperately with cupped hands. The child's silhouette and the way he moved suggested he was Native American, most likely from one of the Pueblo communities in the area. Daniel dismounted quietly and approached slowly, not wanting to frighten someone who was obviously in need. "Easy there, son," Daniel said softly in Spanish, then repeated it in the few words of Tiwa he'd learned from trading with local Pueblo people. "No one's going to hurt you." The child looked up with large, dark eyes that reflected both fear and exhaustion. He was indeed Native American, with the traditional clothing and features of the local Pueblo peoples, but his clothes were torn and dusty, and his thin face spoke of days without adequate food. "Please, Sigor," the boy said in accented but clear Spanish. "I was just getting water. I will leave now." "Hold on," Daniel said gently, switching to Spanish since the boy seemed comfortable with it. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated, clearly torn between his need for help and his fear of this stranger. "I am called Aiyen," he said finally. "It means place of the little spring in my language." "That's a good name," Daniel said, kneeling down to Aiyen's level. "I'm Daniel. This is my ranch, but you're welcome to the water." "When did you last eat, Aiyen?" The question seemed to break down the boy's careful composure. His small shoulders sagged as he admitted the truth that Daniel had already suspected. "I was just hungry," Aiyen said simply, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have not eaten in 3 days." The simple honesty of those words hit Daniel harder than any elaborate sob story could have. Here was a child, alone in the desert, admitting to desperate hunger with the straightforward dignity that seemed to come naturally to him. 3 days, Daniel repeated, feeling his heart clench at the thought. "Where's your family, son?" Aiyen's face shadowed with pain. "My village. There was sickness. Many people died. My grandmother sent me away so I would not get sick too. But..." His voice trailed off. Daniel understood immediately. Disease outbreaks were tragically common in native communities, often wiping out entire families or even whole villages. This boy had been sent away to save his life, but that salvation had left him completely alone. "Where were you trying to go?" "My grandmother said I have an uncle in a village near the big river, but I got lost. I have been walking for many days." Daniel realized that Aiyen was probably trying to reach relatives along the Rio Grande, but the boy was at least 50 miles from the nearest Pueblo settlement in that direction. "Aiyen," Daniel said gently, "when did you last have a real meal?" "Before the sickness came to our village," the boy replied. "Maybe 10 days ago." 10 days. This child had been surviving on whatever he could forage for 10 days, and nothing at all for the last 3. The fact that he was still conscious and coherent was a testament to remarkable strength. Without hesitation, Daniel stood and extended his hand to Aiyen. "Come with me, son. Let's get you some food and a safe place to sleep." Aiyen looked at Daniel's outstretched hand with a mixture of hope and wariness. "You would help me? Even though you're what?" Daniel asked. "A hungry child who needs help. That's exactly who I would help." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe how this simple act of compassion changes both their lives. As Daniel led Aiyen toward his small but comfortable ranch house, the boy walked with the careful dignity of someone who'd been taught to be proud of his heritage. Despite his current circumstances, inside the house, Daniel immediately began preparing food, leftover stew that he warmed over the fire, fresh bread that he'd baked that morning, milk from his cow, and an apple from his small orchard. The meal wasn't elaborate, but it was nourishing and plentiful. Aiyen stared at the food as if he couldn't believe it was real. "It's all for you," Daniel said, settling down across from the boy. "Eat as much as you want, but go slowly at first, so you don't make yourself sick." As Aiyen ate with the careful restraint of someone who'd learned not to waste a single crumb, Daniel studied the boy more carefully. Despite his obvious hardship, Aiyen had good manners, spoke intelligently, and carried himself with a natural dignity that impressed Daniel. "Aiyen," Daniel said as the boy ate, "tell me about your village. What was it like before the sickness came?" Aiyen's face lit up as he described his home, a small Pueblo community, where his grandmother was a respected elder, where he'd been learning traditional crafts and stories, where everyone looked out for each other like one large family. "My grandmother taught me to weave and to read the signs of weather and seasons," Aiyen said proudly. "She said I was a quick learner." "I'm sure you are," Daniel said, impressed by the boy's intelligence and the love in his voice when he spoke of his grandmother. "Sigurd Daniel," Aiyen said as he finished eating, "why are you being kind to me? Most of the white settlers I have seen do not like native people." Daniel considered how to answer this honest question from a child who'd clearly experienced prejudice. Despite his young age, Daniel said finally, "I was raised to believe that when someone is hungry, you feed them. When someone needs shelter, you provide it. The color of their skin or the language they speak doesn't change that. Your parents taught you this, my parents, my grandfather, and life itself." Daniel replied, "I've been hungry before. I've been alone and scared. I know what it feels like to need help and not know where to find it." Aiyen nodded solemnly, understanding that Daniel's kindness came from experience rather than just abstract principles. "Sigurd Daniel," Aiyen said carefully, "I do not want to be a burden. I can work. I am small, but I am strong." Daniel looked at this remarkable boy who was more concerned with earning his keep than with receiving charity, and felt something warm settle in his chest. "Aiyen," Daniel said, "you're not a burden. You're a guest in my home, and guests don't have to work for their welcome, but if it would make you feel better, I could use help with the horses and chickens. They seem to like children better than adults sometimes." As Daniel prepared a comfortable bed for Aiyen in the small spare room, both of them understood that something significant was beginning. The hungry native child had found more than just food and shelter. He'd found someone who saw his worth as a human being rather than as a problem to be solved or avoided. Daniel had found something he hadn't realized he'd been missing, the opportunity to make a real difference in someone's life through simple human kindness. 2 weeks had passed since Daniel Martinez had found Aiyen drinking from his water trough, and the transformation in both their lives had been remarkable. The thin, desperate child had grown stronger and more confident with regular meals and safety, while Daniel had discovered that having someone to care for and teach had given his solitary ranch life new purpose and meaning. Aiyen had proven to be everything Daniel had sensed in that first encounter: intelligent, hardworking, and possessed of skills and knowledge that impressed the cowboy daily. The boy had an intuitive understanding of animals that made him invaluable with the horses, and his knowledge of desert plants and weather patterns was far superior to Daniel's own. "Sigurd Daniel," Aiyen said one morning as they worked together, repairing a section of fence, "the clouds are telling us that rain will come today, but not until evening." Daniel looked at the sky, which appeared clear to him, then back at Aiyen. "How can you tell?" "My grandmother taught me to read the signs," Aiyen explained proudly. "See how the wind moves, and the way the birds are flying. The rain spirits are gathering, but they are not ready yet." Sure enough, that evening brought a gentle but steady rain that was perfect for Daniel's small garden and the desert plants around his ranch. "You were exactly right," Daniel said as they sat on the porch, listening to the rain. "Your grandmother taught you well." Aiyen's face glowed with pride at the praise, but Daniel could also see the sadness that always appeared when the boy thought about his lost family. "Do you think she's still alive?" Aiyen asked quietly. Daniel chose his words carefully. "I don't know, son, but I know that wherever she is, she'd be proud of how brave and smart and kind you've become." Their peaceful routine was interrupted the next morning by the arrival of unexpected visitors. 3 men on horseback approached the ranch, and Daniel's instincts immediately told him this wasn't a social call. The lead rider was a territorial official named Henderson, whose job involved managing relations between settlers and native tribes. Behind him rode two men who had the look of professional troublemakers. "Mr. Martinez," Henderson said, dismounting with obvious self-importance, "I've received reports that you're harboring an Indian child on your property." Daniel felt his protective instincts surge as he stepped between Henderson and Aiyen, who had moved closer to Daniel's side. "I'm providing shelter to a child who needed help," Daniel said firmly. "Is there a law against helping hungry children?" "There are regulations about unauthorized contact with native populations," Henderson replied pompously. "This child belongs with his own people. His people are dead." Daniel said bluntly, "He was trying to reach relatives when I found him. But he's just a boy alone in the desert. Would you rather I'd left him to starve?" Henderson looked uncomfortable with Daniel's direct challenge, but one of his companions, a hard-looking man named Garrett, spoke up with obvious hostility. "Indians are Indians," Garrett said. "They cause nothing but trouble, no matter how young they are. Boy probably grew up learning to steal and raid." Daniel felt anger flare in his chest at the casual racism directed toward Aiyen, but the boy himself responded with a dignity that put the adults to shame. "I was not taught to steal," Aiyen said clearly, looking directly at Garrett. "I was taught to work hard, to respect my elders, and to help others when they need help." The simple truth of Aiyen's words seemed to embarrass Henderson, who was beginning to realize that his mission wasn't as clear-cut as he'd been told. "The boy seems well cared for," Henderson admitted reluctantly, "but the regulations require that native children be placed with their own people or in designated facilities. Subscribe to our channel now. The heartwarming defense that follows will restore your faith in standing up for what's right." Daniel realized that Henderson was essentially proposing to take Aiyen away from the first security and love the boy had known since losing his family, all in the name of bureaucratic regulations that had nothing to do with Aiyen's actual welfare. "Mr. Henderson," Daniel said firmly, "this boy has no own people left alive. His village was wiped out by disease. I'm the only family he has now." "You're not family," Garrett interjected. "You're just some Mexican cowboy who doesn't understand the problems Indians cause." Daniel's anger at the racial slur was overshadowed by his determination to protect Aiyen. "I understand that Aiyen is a good boy who deserves a chance at a decent life," Daniel said. "And I understand that anyone who tries to take him away from a place where he's safe and loved is the real problem here." Henderson looked uncertain, clearly caught between his official duties and the obvious reality that Aiyen was thriving in Daniel's care. "The boy does appear healthy and well-educated," Henderson said slowly, "because Sigor Daniel is a good teacher and a kind man." Aiyen spoke up with the directness that Daniel had come to admire. "He has taught me about cattle and horses, and I have taught him about reading weather and finding water. We help each other." The simple explanation of their relationship seemed to affect Henderson more than any argument Daniel could have made. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Martinez?" Henderson asked. "I'm proposing to continue caring for Aiyen until he's old enough to make his own decisions about his future," Daniel replied. "If he wants to seek out distant relatives, then I'll help him do that. If he wants to stay here and learn ranching, he's welcome to do that too. And if I refuse to allow this arrangement..." Daniel's answer was quiet, but carried unmistakable determination. "Then you'll have to explain to the territorial authorities why you think a hungry child was better off alone in the desert than safe and cared for on my ranch." Henderson studied Daniel's resolute face, then looked at Aiyen, who stood close to Daniel with obvious trust and affection. "I'll need to file a report about this situation," Henderson said finally, "but I suppose there's no immediate crisis that requires intervention." As Henderson and his companions prepared to leave, Garrett made one final attempt to cause trouble. "This won't end well, Martinez," he said. "Indians always turn on the people who try to help them." Aiyen looked up at this cruel man with the same dignity he'd shown throughout the confrontation. "Sir," Aiyen said politely, "my grandmother taught me that people who judge others by their race instead of their actions are the ones who cannot be trusted." The wisdom of an 8-year-old child delivered with perfect politeness left Garrett speechless and clearly embarrassed. After the visitors left, Daniel put his arm around Aiyen's shoulders, proud of how the boy had handled himself during a difficult situation. "You did well, son," Daniel said. "You showed them exactly what kind of person you are." "Will they come back?" Aiyen asked. "Maybe," Daniel said honestly. "But if they do, we'll face it together. That's what families do." Aiyen looked up at Daniel with eyes that shone with gratitude and love. "Families," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I like that." As they returned to their daily routine of ranch work and mutual teaching, both Daniel and Aiyen understood that they'd passed an important test. They'd proven to themselves and to others that their bond was strong enough to withstand outside pressure and that their chosen family was worth defending. 1 year had passed since Daniel Martinez had given bread and shelter to a hungry native child, and the bond between them had deepened into something that transcended their different backgrounds and cultures. Aiyen had grown taller and stronger, but more importantly, he'd grown in confidence and knowledge under Daniel's patient guidance. The boy had become indispensable to the ranch operation, not just through his work, but through his insights and skills that Daniel had never possessed. Aiyen's ability to predict weather, locate water sources, and understand animal behavior had made the small ranch more successful than it had ever been. But their greatest achievement was less tangible. They'd created a family built on mutual respect, love, and the daily choice to care for each other despite the cultural barriers that society expected to divide them. "Papa Daniel," Aiyen said one morning as they prepared for a cattle drive to the nearest town, "I have been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up." The title Papa Daniel had developed naturally over the months, and Daniel treasured it more than any honor he'd ever received. It represented not just affection, but Aiyen's conscious choice to claim Daniel as his father. "What have you been thinking, son?" "I want to be a bridge between our peoples," Aiyen said seriously. "I want to help settlers and native people understand each other better, the way you and I understand each other." Daniel felt his chest swell with pride at Aiyen's mature wisdom and generous spirit. "That's a worthy goal," Daniel said. "How do you think you could accomplish it?" "By learning as much as I can about both worlds," Aiyen replied. "You've taught me about ranching and business and the ways of settlers, but I also want to learn more about my own people's traditions and knowledge." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a visitor that neither of them had expected. An elderly Pueblo man riding a sturdy horse and wearing traditional clothing mixed with practical frontier gear. The man was clearly native American, but his bearing and equipment suggested someone with authority and purpose, rather than a casual traveler. "I am looking for the boy called Aiyen," the man said in accented but clear English as he dismounted. Daniel stepped slightly closer to Aiyen, his protective instincts engaged. But Aiyen's reaction surprised him. "Grandfather," Aiyen said in wonder, using the Tiwa word for elder. The old man's weathered face broke into a smile as he looked at Aiyen. "Little grandson of my heart," he said, switching to Tiwa. "I have been searching for you for many months." Daniel realized he was witnessing a reunion between Aiyen and a surviving relative, the kind of meeting he'd both hoped for and dreaded since taking the boy in. The old man introduced himself as Francisco Tafoya, a respected elder from a Pueblo community along the Rio Grande. He was not Aiyen's blood relative, but had been a close friend of Aiyen's grandmother and had promised her on her deathbed to find the boy she'd sent away to save his life. "Your grandmother survived the sickness," Francisco told Aiyen in English, so Daniel could understand, "but she was very weak, and she died 2 months ago. Before she passed, she made me promise to find you and make sure you were safe." Aiyen's eyes filled with tears at this news, but Daniel could see that it brought closure rather than just sadness. The boy had been wondering about his grandmother's fate for a year. "She wanted you to know," Francisco continued, "that she was proud of your courage and that she hoped you would grow up to honor both the old ways and the new paths you might choose to follow." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe how this reunion transforms everyone's understanding of family and belonging. Francisco turned to Daniel with an expression of curiosity and assessment. "You are the man who took in our lost child," he said. "I have heard stories about you from traders and travelers. They say you treat the boy like your own son." "He is my son," Daniel replied simply. "In every way that matters." Francisco nodded approvingly. "This is what I hope to find." Aiyen's grandmother was wise to send him away from the sickness, and the spirits were wise to guide him to you. What followed was one of the most important conversations of Daniel's and Aiyen's lives. Francisco explained that he'd come not to take Aiyen away, but to ensure that the boy was truly happy and well cared for. If he was, Francisco wanted to establish an ongoing relationship that would allow Aiyen to learn about his native heritage while continuing to live with Daniel. The boy belongs where he is loved and where he can grow into the man he's meant to become, Francisco said. But he should also know where he came from and understand the wisdom of his ancestors. "I would welcome that," Daniel said honestly. "Aiyen has taught me so much about his people's knowledge. I'd like him to learn even more." Aiyen looked between his two father figures with joy and gratitude shining on his young face. "Can we do that?" he asked eagerly. "Can I learn from both of you?" "That is exactly what we will do," Francisco replied with a smile. 6 months later, Daniel's ranch had become an unofficial meeting ground where settlers and native people could interact peacefully and learn from each other. Francisco visited regularly, teaching Aiyen traditional skills and stories while also sharing his people's agricultural and environmental knowledge with local ranchers. But the most significant change was in Aiyen himself. Now 10 years old, he moved confidently between both worlds, serving as a translator and cultural bridge that helped prevent misunderstandings and conflicts. "Papa Daniel," Aiyen said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, "do you remember that first night when I told you I was just hungry?" "I remember," Daniel replied. "I was hungry for food, but I was also hungry for something else." Aiyen continued with the wisdom that never ceased to amaze Daniel. "I was hungry for a place to belong, for someone to care about me. And now I understand that family isn't just about blood or tribe or race," Aiyen said. "It's about choosing to love someone and letting them love you back." Daniel looked at his son, this remarkable boy who'd bridged two worlds and created understanding where there had once been fear and prejudice. "You know, Aiyen, when I gave you bread and a place to sleep that night, I thought I was just helping a hungry child. What do you think now?" "Now I think you saved me as much as I saved you," Daniel replied honestly. "You taught me that the most important thing a person can do is see the humanity in others, no matter how different they might seem." Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of cross-cultural friendship and chosen family from the American frontier. Hit that subscribe button now because these tales prove that love and understanding can bridge any divide. 10 years later, Aiyen Martinez da Foya had become one of the most respected cultural liaisons in New Mexico territory, helping to negotiate peaceful agreements between settlers and native communities throughout the region. He'd learned to move seamlessly between worlds, honoring both his native heritage and his chosen family with Daniel. But the moment that meant the most to both of them came at Daniel's 65th birthday celebration, when Aiyen stood before a gathering of friends from both cultures and spoke about the power of simple human kindness. "Many years ago, I was a hungry child who had lost everything," Aiyen said. This man didn't see a potential problem or a cultural threat. He saw a child who needed help, and he provided it without question or conditions. That simple act of compassion didn't just save one boy's life. It created a bridge between peoples who had been taught to fear each other. And it proved that family is built on love and choice rather than just blood and tradition. As the celebration continued around them, Daniel and Aiyen stood together watching friends from many different backgrounds sharing food and stories, united by their respect for the family that had been built from one man's decision to help a hungry child. "I was just hungry," Aiyen had said that night long ago. So Daniel had given him bread and a place to sleep, never imagining that those simple gifts would grow into a love that transcended cultural boundaries and created understanding between two worlds. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible tales of cross-cultural family and frontier bridge building to life. Subscribe now and join us for more amazing stories that prove kindness is the universal language that connects all hearts.